Jury selection is underway in the sex trafficking trial against hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. This comes nearly 8 months after his arrest. Both sides are hoping to find 12 jurors who can be fair despite the publicity this case has received. Diddy has pleaded not guilty, but if convicted, he could face life in prison. National correspondent Alex Miller is live outside the Manhattan courthouse. Alex, it seems like it's been slow going. How is it coming along at this hour?
Well, jury selection, the first day has now wrapped up, but essentially it was a slow day. The first half of the day, the judge seemed very pleased with how quickly it moved, but right after lunch, we spent about an hour and a half excusing a handful of jurors. In that time, just 1 or 2 were able to get through to the next round. Remember, this is just the first part of jury selection. They need to get a couple dozen potential jurors through after they've answered this initial questionnaire, answered questions from the judge. If the judge deems them legitimate enough to move to the next round, then they go and they'll be asked even more questions from both the prosecution and from the defense. And so they need to get that few dozen before they can move on to that process. That is not even close to happen just yet, and they want to wrap this up by Wednesday, though they do have the entire week should they need it. But the jurors were asked a lot of personal questions. Obviously, this case involves sex trafficking, and the description in that 14-page indictment talks about beating up both men and women, talking about rape, talking about extortion, things along those lines. And so there is a lot to be answered for in terms of people's personal experiences. And so potential jurors were asked about their own experiences with sexual assault, sexual harassment, and domestic violence, and at least half a dozen of them had their own personal experiences, whether it was 4 women who talked about their own sexual assault when they were younger, or whether it was one man who his sister was a victim of domestic violence, a woman whose mother was a survivor of domestic violence. All of these things could be relevant, and not all of them thought that they could put aside those memories to be a fair and impartial juror. They were also asked whether or not they felt comfortable talking about these issues with other jurors, something that they're of course going to have to do in the deliberation room. They were asked about whether they felt comfortable watching videos. We are likely going to be shown a lot of footage over the course of this 8-week trial or so. So that is really the crux of this issue. The other really big takeaway here is that now infamous hotel video that shows Combs punching and beating up and kicking Cassie Ventura. That video may be entered into evidence. Cassie Ventura called to the stand, so they were asked, some potential jurors asked if they had seen the video. Nearly every juror who was asked about it had seen that video, or at least still images from it, something obviously the defense does not want. They tried to get those jurors thrown out. Not all of them were in the hearings that we had leading up to this trial. The defense has been fighting hard to not allow that into evidence. It's unclear whether we're going to see the video in its entirety. The prosecution dropping a little bit of a bomb today, saying that they're not going to show the CNN video, which is originally how this video came about. But we may see the video in its entirety at some point today. Obviously, Diddy has a lot of star power here. So before jurors even walked in the room, they were handed a big binder of relevant people and places that they were asked to identify. Now, it doesn't mean that these people engaged in these escapades, these alleged escapades with Sean Combs, but they are at least somewhat relevant to the story. It doesn't also mean that these people are going to be called as witnesses, but there were a number of big names that were talked about in this courtroom just in terms of whether or not these people recognize them. And so there's still a lot more to answer for, a lot of people left to question that will happen over the next at least day and a half.
All right, Alex Miller in New York for us. Alex, thank you for that update.